I'm writing a book on the history of Black towns and settlements. This town will be in the book as I am about to finish the writing. It gives me more energy. So I'm excited that I'm on the right path, that I had never heard of this town. And so many of them that are in the book, but this one in particular. Oh man, this guy here is going to tell it to you straight, no chaser, like what I do, so that you can hear this amazing story of these resilient, tenacious brothers and sisters in this town in Ohio. Strength, tenacity, resilience, and a sense of oneness, nobility, and grace. And that is my introduction to the strong brother on the channel. Come on. I'm happy you here.
All right. Thank you, Anthony. My name is Larry Hamilton. I am a retired Black history teacher from Piqua, Ohio. It's probably the only city of its demographics that has tolerated or allowed the teaching of a Black history course for 30 consecutive years. So I taught from 1971 to 2001. And after retirement, I wasn't that tired, decided to thank the city that allowed me to reside and rear my children and experience a wonderful lifestyle. And I offered the community an opportunity for casting itself as a inclusively hospitable community.
Okay.
And I had known that there was an opportunity to build a Miami Erie Canal Museum in one of the most important historic tourist destinations in the state of Ohio, the Johnston Farm. The Johnston Farm was about to receive the support and funding to build a new addition to its museum that was already in existence that featured the interaction between Europeans and the Native Americans.
So now Rossville is where?
Rossville is on the north side of the Great Miami River. Let me tell you a little bit about the circumstances by which the Black community was given an opportunity to live in Rossville. In 1833, the master of this enslaved group of about 400 Black people died. His name was John Randolph. The cousin of John Randolph was Thomas Jefferson. John Randolph was a part of the political clan that was perhaps the most powerful political family in colonial and history, as well as that infancy period of the United States before the Civil War. There was no more powerful group of people, I would argue, in the United States than that political clan called the Randolphs. John Randolph, who owned about 8,000 to 10,000 acres of land and farmed that land with approximately 400 Black slaves.
So he got 400 enslaved people.
Yes.
And then they leave when they get their freedom. Isn't that kind of what I?
So, but yeah, it's a long drawn out process. He died in 1833. He had left 3 wills, and so the relatives, of course, did not want to see those slaves getting up and walking away from Roanoke Plantation in Virginia. You can bet that was the case. They contested the manumission of those slaves, and the court battle went on from 1833 to 1846, where they continued to remain enslaved.
Right.
But the courts finally in 1846 ruled in favor of the estate of John Randolph, and the leader of the estate had come to Ohio, had purchased land in Mercer County. And the reason why is because there was already a small, Black, fairly intelligent and educated group that had left Cincinnati as a result of riots and who had decided to turn to farming, largely through the encouragement of a man who was a Quaker by the name of Augustus Wattles. Okay. So he built what would be called the Emblem Institute and would serve the purpose of acculturation on the part of Blacks and Native Americans.
Oh.
So
there's a lot of Indian Native Americans in the region.
Yeah. What's interesting, the same year that the Blacks arrived to inherit their land and property in the amount of 3,200 acres, the whites had began pushing the Indians out in that same time frame around 1846. They were being pushed out and expelled from that area. And so too were the Randolph freedmen, who were being denied the opportunity to settle on their own land that had been purchased for them. So it resulted in them being accosted in New Bremen. And at that time, New Bremen was a part of Mercer County, and being pushed back down the canal, the Miami Area Canal, which is the reason why I was saying that the Johnston Farm should accept my efforts to create a branch of a museum at the farm on behalf of the Black Randolph freedmen people.
They were on a boat. They were on a boat going down the river, right?
So here's a little bit more meat on that bone. They walked about 300 miles from southern Virginia, Charlotte County, up to and through the Kanawha Valley and boarded a steamship on the Ohio River. They took that down to Cincinnati. And from Cincinnati, they took the canal boats north through Dayton and Piqua on up to Mercer County and New Bremen. And it was in New Bremen that they were sat upon by a mob. And this white mob had been festered. There were politicians, as is always the case, who tried to foment a great deal more animosity towards these people. And when they got to New Bremen, there was a mob that said, no, we ain't going to let you off of these boats. You going to have to turn around and get out of here. And that's what happened. So they went back down the Miami Erie Canal, and they resided for 5 days at the Johnston Farm. They were allowed to encamp there for 5 days while the people of Piqua decided whether or not they were going to allow them to remain in their neighborhood. The people of Piqua decided they would not be as inhospitable as the people were in Mercer County, but they didn't decide to embrace fully these Randolph formerly enslaved people. So they said, we're not going to allow you to live in Piqua proper, but we don't mind if you want to live across the river in this place called Rossville. Okay. And we will allow you to work as domestics or barbers or laborers in the city of Piqua, but we're not going to allow you to reside there. So that was the half measure of hospitality that the people of Piqua took. They allowed the Rossville settlement. From there, some of the Randolphs moved north up towards a place called Rumley in Sydney, Ohio, and others moved further south to Troy and West Milton. And West Milton almost had no blacks at that time, but it was a Quaker community that was really open and responsive to aiding these black brothers.
So how big is Rossville? How many acres might that be?
So it's a very small area. The Randolphs were able to buy over time, as a result of their hard work and labor, parcels and build homes in that section.
What's there now?
Almost nothing that would give you the hint that black people had lived there almost exclusively, other than a cemetery, the African Jackson Cemetery, that has maybe 10 to 15 headstones. Okay. But as a result of the archival work of some people, we know that there were a significant number of people who were buried there. And there's about 125, 130 people who were buried there, but there are only 10, 12 headstones there. And most of those are USCTs.
That's colored troops.
Fought in the Civil War. There's probably about 6 or 7 of those headstones still recognizable within the African Jackson Cemetery.
Is it called Rossville still? Or?
Yes, it is still called Rossville. However, there are almost no blacks now that live within that area. Now, when I came to town back in 1971, there were still the remnants of the Randolph people living in that area. And up to about 10 years ago, there remained a house or two. And there are some parcels that are owned by blacks still in Rossville.
How do you know this story? I mean, you're a historian and you taught history. But is there a remembrance of some sort where maybe descendants come back to Rossville, or was it taught in the grade schools or anything like that? And did you teach it?
I was taught this information by a lady who had a mission or drive to preserve that history. Her name was Helen, they called her Delia Gilmore. I became friends with Helen, and she began to acquaint me with the story of Rossville. And I began to take students to Rossville to hear the story directly from Helen. And eventually, a genealogy group that I belonged to, called the African American Genealogy Group of the Miami Valley, a largely black group, had taken an interest in the Randolph freedmen. So Helen had a Freedom Days celebration. It was like a reunion on the part of these Randolph descended people, and they would come back and gather at the York Ryle House, which is the house that Helen used as a museum. And people gathered at that place and fellowshipped and socialized. And
is there a historical marker there?
Yes, there's a historical marker located in the cemetery. There's a historical marker located at the York Ryle House. The artifacts and the materials that she had collected and housed in the York Ryle House Museum remain in Miami County or Piqua. And so she decided to give those archive materials to the museum located at Wilberforce and Central State University.
So have you seen a lot of those documents?
Sure.
And they're documents of what? Land deeds, that kind of thing?
There's a little bit of everything there that archivists would have an interest in. For example, I saw the names and the layout of the African Jackson Cemetery. It looks nothing like it is actually today. I'm serving on a committee, the African Jackson Cemetery Committee, attempting to find a renovation and preservation effort.
Of the cemetery, okay.
The Allens in Arlington, Texas, they have developed some plans that have been to the liking of the committee. And now it's the committee's role, responsibility to began to promote that landscape architectural plan and fundraise so that plan can be implemented within the African Jackson Cemetery.
How great was Rossville in its heyday? How many people might have lived there? Was it primarily self-sufficient, that kind of thing in its own right?
The community was largely self-sufficient. They had some opportunities to shop in Rossville, but largely most of the business of acquiring groceries and merchandise would have been acquired in Piqua.
But in Rossville, I'm sure they developed a church, might have had a school or any of those kind of things.
By the late 50s, the African Baptist Church had been formed. Now, it didn't stay together, and Piqua would later open its doors in a more hospitable manner to the Randolph people, who were allowed to live in a couple of different areas within Piqua. One was called Bassett Avenue, which was at the far southern part of the community, and the northern area that was a enclave for domestics who took care of wealthy white people up on the hill, so to speak.
Yeah, I got you.
And so they lived down on areas of Camp Street and Madison Avenue.
Just a couple more. Was Rossville a lot of a unique type of homes that the black people lived in? Were there shacks and shanties, or how did they make it look?
All of the above. It was primarily shanty structures. However, there were some homes, like the York Ryle House. Later homes that were built in the 20th century had more fashionable appearances. Right. But the immediate structures, Randolph people who were allowed to live in Rossville, these were shanties largely. Right. And some of those shanties were still existing in the early 70s when I first came to town as a teacher.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
My last question, so to speak, is how do people help you?
I know that the Lord will send to me the people who have the skills and the drive and know-how to be able to accomplish the things that I advocate and propose for. We need to be giving ownership identity to those people who were denied and have been denied some place in the memory or the history of communities and cities and states and so forth. And that's a part of what I'm advocating. Doing the right thing,
yes,
through ownership identity. Doing the right thing outlines my vision for Piqua.
Hey, everybody, I told you you're going to like this. Now, did y'all get what he was saying? He's in that town by himself, and he's walking around and he's teaching, and it ain't but a few black students in the school, so a lot of white students take his class, and he's opening up their minds to the side of history that is not normally taught, and he's been doing it a long time, and it became his calling, because you can feel the energy. He said, this is what I'm here to do. I really appreciate who you've become.
I appreciate you giving me this opportunity to share with your audience. Before I leave, I want to say my wife is a beautiful person, a retired educator in the Piqua City school system where she taught art.
Thank you so very much. With that, I say bye-bye, we out.
Thank you.